Join me in welcoming Her Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda. Please, you may be seated. Your Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Excellencies, Ambassadors, and High Commissioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my honor to welcome you to this international conference on genocide prevention held in the context of the annual Kwibuka commemoration. Today's discussion will look back at the history of the genocide with panelists that lived through the genocide, have dedicated their lives to research, advocacy, and actions to prevent genocide and raise awareness on the topic. We will also discuss contemporary challenges, including the persistence of genocide ideology, genocide denial, and the urgent need for sustained action. This will be done through two panel discussions on the themes of persistence of genocide ideology in the region and on survival and resilience. After the two panels, we will break for lunch before proceeding with the second part of our program, which is a tribute to Ibuka's 30-year journey. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Jean-Damascene Bizimana, Minister of National Unity and Civic Engagements, to deliver his welcome remarks.
Excellence, Madame Jeannette Kagame, Première Dame du Rwanda, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, représentants du corps diplomatique et des organisations internationales accréditées au Rwanda, Monsieur Sharoka Beyani, conseiller du secrétaire général des Nations Unies en charge de la prévention du génocide, Monsieur Dani Dayan, Yad Vashem Chairman, distingués invités, tout honneur respecté, chers participants, bonjour. Mon premier mot est de vous souhaiter les bienvenus au Rwanda pour ceux qui ont fait le voyage dans le but de s'unir aux Rwandais pour cette 32e commémoration du génocide perpétré contre les Tutsis et pour la participation à ce colloque. Merci pour votre solidarité avec les Rwandais.
Of the genocide. We are very grateful to the people who pioneered and were key people in organizing Obuka. So we're here for this scientific conference in order to reflect on the challenges of commemoration and the challenges of memory in general, and also the efforts to minimize the genocide and to negate it. We have to speak squarely, very clearly, because the genocide against the Tutsi was genocide that had its own specificity and its own history. The ICTR in the 10th of June 2006 proved that, established that and the UN Security Council also endorsed that qualification in its resolution 2050. And therefore, member states are obligated by international law to fight against genocide, denial, and minimization. Therefore, the genocide of the Tutsis of Rwanda was the last of the century, but also the first to be recognized by the United Nations in Africa, formally recognized as such since the adoption of the Genocide Convention of 1948. Well, this is a very sad first, a very sad prominence, but there you are. Now, as regards the participation of women in the genocide, Rwanda and Africa were unfortunately also the first in this sad way, because the first woman in the world to have been condemned by an international jurisdiction for the crime of genocide since 1948 was a former minister, Pauline Nyamasuhuko, who was also minister for women, for women's promotion, and she's the first to be condemned for genocide as a woman. Well, this is a very sad first also. Moreover, there is a factor of the indifference of other African countries. This is very sad, but also prominent. Since 32, for the last 32 years, no African country has condemned a single genocide suspect. And there have been international arrest warrants that were sent to various countries who house or who have welcomed those criminals. That is also something that we have to think about. Another point is the genocide denial, which is growing, especially through the use of social media, and it goes with direct promotion and encouragement of genocide ideologies and genocide as such by the DRC. Today, Patrice Meya, his friends and sympathizers, who was very openly promoting and justifying support to FDLR. As everybody knows, these elements of FDLR committed the genocide. Everybody knows this is an established fact, legally established. And it is very surprising to see that in Western countries, no country can with impunity collaborate with the neo-Nazi elements because otherwise the international community is up in arms against them. Yet, in Congo, a genocidal policy is supported, promoted, and is encouraging these tropical Nazi, FDLR tropical Nazis. And nobody condemns them. Nobody, no voice in the international community has ever been heard to condemn this very, very serious phenomenon. And this phenomenon has to be analyzed, therefore, and an appropriate scientific response has to be provided. because it is the very same or the very same phenomenon, the very same pattern that was observed in Rwanda over the period that preceded the genocide of '94. That is, it started in '90 and it went on exactly as it is being done in Congo. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1945, the UN Charter was established to prevent genocide. In 1948, the Genocide Convention was adopted to prevent and punish and repress genocide. Unfortunately, the implementation is always lacking. So we know, we denounce, we say no. We will not compromise, we will not be indifferent, we will not be complicit. We will go on speaking against this. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, moderators. Thank you, speakers who are going to be that we're going to hear today, and thank you all of you for your presence. Thank you so much for having come to be with us, and I wish you a happy, fruitful meeting.
Thank you, Minister Bizimana. Just a reminder, we have simultaneous translation available. Channel 1 is for English, Channel 2 is for French, Channel 3 is for Kinyarwanda. Pour rappel, nous avons la traduction simultanée.
We'll have simultaneous interpretation. English at Channel 1, French Channel 2, French Kinyarwanda Channel 3.
Right, Mr. Shadoka Beyani, United Nations Secretary General's Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide, to deliver his opening remarks.
Sur la prévention du
Stage.
Her Excellency, the First Lady of Rwanda, Excellency Minister Dr. Bizimana, Excellencies, distinguished guests. It is with profound honor to be here in Kigali and speaking to you for the first time since my appointment in September last year as the United Nations Special Advisor on the Prevention of Genocide. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the government and people of Rwanda for extending an invitation to me to solemnly join Kwibuka, the 32nd commemoration of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Genocide is the most heinous crime committed against humanity. The essence of it is the extermination of people based on their identity. When the genocide against the Tutsi occurred in 1994, I was an academic specializing in international law at the University of Oxford, and I was also a member of the Board of Trustees at Oxfam as lead trustee on basic rights and complex emergencies. In this capacity, I received in April 1994 reports from Oxfam staff in Rwanda of mass killings of Tutsis. We examined the evidence of the killings and concluded that this amounted to genocide. Oxfam was therefore one of the first humanitarian organizations to acknowledge and denounce genocide against Tutsis in Rwanda. Later in July that year, I visited Rwanda at the invitation of Oxfam and the Jesuit Refugee Service. I spent a week at the Jesuits Christus Center in Kigali, discussing with them what is genocide and how did elements of their church get involved in genocide in Rwanda. At the center, the room where some Jesuits were killed and was still locked. After leaving the center, I saw dead bodies, victims of genocide in public places in Kigali, an unforgettable experience that shocked the core of my conscience as a human being. As an academic and international lawyer, I worked with the International Conference on the Great Lakes from 2003 to 2006 to prevent future genocide in the Great Lakes region. I worked closely with a delegation of Rwanda at the time. I recall Dr. Richard Sesbera, Ambassador Mtabova, who were amongst the delegates of Rwanda at that particular conference. Subsequently, I drafted the 2006 Pact on Stability, Security, and Development as a prevention framework, which included for the first time an instrument aimed at preventing genocide after the 1948 Convention on the Prevention of Genocide. The emphasis was to put in place institutional and legal frameworks for the prevention and punishment of genocide and other crimes within the Great Lakes region. It has always been my belief that studying what happened in the past needs to be instrumental to preventing the commission of the gravest international crimes. This is the core of my mandate. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, genocide is deliberately designed to effect mass execution. It takes systematic planning to execute it. While it can be committed very rapidly, the preparation of it is done in time and space. We recall the genocideer Leon Mugesera's hateful speech made in 1992, 2 years earlier, inciting hatred and genocide against Tutsis. Let's wipe out the scum, he said. The crime of genocide cannot be committed without state failure or complicity. And because it is a process and it takes time to plan and execute it, therein lies an opportunity to prevent it. In 1994, the international community, including the United Nations, failed Rwanda. The early warning signs were there. The information was relayed to the relevant institutions like the UN and the OAU then. The capitals of those countries with influence and capability to prevent genocide were informed. But still, and in spite of all of these, genocide against the Tutsis was committed in this country. The failure to prevent the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis had a profound influence on how the United Nations has developed over the past 32 years. That failure led to the creation of my office to act as an early warning to prevent genocide directly as a result of the lessons learned of the failure to prevent the genocide we are commemorating today. In 2005, member states adopted the World Summit outcome in which they committed to prevent genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing, commonly referred to as the responsibility to protect. Looking at the dire situation of conflicts around the world, from Sudan to the Middle East to the volatile situation of the Great Lakes, we are still coming short in upholding our obligations to prevent genocide and other atrocity crimes. We are increasingly seeing well-established norms and values being eroded, xenophobia, racism, and intolerance increasing globally, and multilateralism is under attack. All these remind us that we must do more to protect people's lives and reinforce preventive engagements and actions. The commitments to prevent that echo in the halls of international institutions must translate into effective prevention in the spaces where this is most needed. Ladies and gentlemen, what does prevention of genocide and other atrocity crimes mean? From the onset, we're required to set up not only effective early warning mechanisms, but also early action to save lives. These two elements cannot be separated. Within the United Nations, my office works as an alert to the Secretary General and through him to the Security Council on the risk of genocide and other atrocity crimes. We alert and recommend action for prevention. It is our collective responsibility to prevent genocide. We must translate early warning into early action. We must collaboratively not only work within the United Nations system, but also with regional organizations like the AU, the International Conference on the Great Lakes, IGAD, the East African Community, ECOWAS, amongst others, national institutions, community and religious leaders, civil society, women, youth, academia, and the media. We must reject hatred, inflammatory rhetoric and incitement to violence, hostility, discrimination, and genocide. The genocide against the Tutsi started with words, the demonization of an entire community group. Whereas incitement is prohibited under international law, hate speech is not. It is subject to restrictions to freedom of expression, but that does not mean that it is acceptable. We must put in place concrete measures to address and counter hate speech because in its worst form, it is an indicator and trigger of the risk of genocide and other atrocity crimes. In cases where competent courts have established the commission of genocide and other atrocity crimes, such as the ICTR, we must uphold those decisions, respect and honor the victims, and counter those who want to deny them. Denial of genocide is the repudiation of judicial decisions and thus undermines the rule of law, demeaning the victims, and worst of all, sowing seeds of recurrence of similar crimes. We must refrain from acts of genocide, denial as part of our core prevention efforts. Effective prevention also means never allowing impunity to reign. Impunity has significantly contributed to recurrences of deadly conflicts on the African continent. In memory of the victims of the genocide against the Tutsi, we should stand together and combat impunity and hold accountable those found culpable of atrocity crimes. It is high time that we operationalized criminal accountability mechanisms for genocide and atrocity crimes of the African Court of Justice, as well as the expanded jurisdiction of the East African Court of Justice. I call for the universal ratification of the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide. I also call for full implementation of the Convention and the 2000 Great Lakes Protocol for the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and all forms of discrimination. All countries should put in place institutional and legal frameworks for the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide and other atrocity crimes, because no one single country or region is immune to these crimes. All societies have risk factors related to atrocity crimes to some extent. For example, community tensions, as well as political, social, and economic challenges with potential impact on national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups. It is how these risk factors are dealt with, if they're mitigated early, that determines if the risks will escalate in situations of more serious concern. In today's world, this balance is not positive. Regrettably, the risk of recurrence of these horrendous crimes has not diminished. People around the world, men, women, children, and the elderly, continue to be killed, abused, displaced, and discriminated against based on their identity. It does not have to be this way, but this requires continued and consistent efforts, well sustained in time. Rwanda has demonstrated that reconciliation is possible with effective promotion of justice, social cohesion, education, targeted efforts to counter intolerance, as well as memorialization of the crime of genocide. As we remember the horrors that took place 32 years ago, let us redouble our efforts to help build resilient societies by ensuring that fundamental rights and freedoms must be guaranteed and protected, particularly non-discrimination. The best way to honor the victims and survivors of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda is to guarantee that no one else endures this most heinous of crimes. This is a call, and it is an obligation of all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have the honor to hear the keynote address by Ambassador Danny Dayan, Chairman of the Yad Vashem. Ambassador, kindly join us on stage.
Murao Neiza, Shalom. Survivors, First Lady, Minister, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I have come from Jerusalem to be with you here in Kigali as we commemorate together the 32nd anniversary of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. I don't come as an expert on Rwanda, but I do come as a friend of Rwanda. And I come as a representative of another people whose history has been marked by genocide. The Jewish people, a people whose experience has shaped much of the world's understanding of genocide itself. And obviously, as I come also as chairman of Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center. I come first and foremost to stand with you, to remember with you, to walk with you, to stand vigil with you, as I did yesterday. I come from Jerusalem, a city where memory is not only preserved in books and archives, but lives in stone, in language, in daily life. A place where the past is never distant and where the responsibility to remember is part of our very existence. The institution that I have the privilege to lead, Yad Vashem, has for decades maintained close and meaningful ties with Rwanda. These ties are rooted in a shared understanding, born of painful experience of what happens when hatred is allowed to grow, when dehumanization becomes normalized, and when the world fails to act in time, as it failed in 1938, as it failed in 1994. The tragedy of Rwanda was not only what was done, but also what was not done. Genocide does not begin with killing. It begins with ideas, deadly ideas. With words that strip people of their humanity, with narratives that turn neighbors into enemies and differences into danger. What Rwanda has aptly defined as genocide ideology reminds us that mass violence is prepared long before it is executed. And it reminds us also that education, grounded in truth and in historical integrity, is one of the most powerful tools of prevention. The genocide against the Tutsi, carried out by extremist Hutu, remains one of the most devastating crimes in modern history. In the span of 100 days, more than 1 million innocent people were murdered, men, women, and children, often by their neighbors. Families were annihilated, communities were erased, the very fabric of society was torn apart. And yet, the genocide did not end when the killing stopped. Its consequences endured in grief, in silence, in trauma, in memory. They endure still. They will endure for generations. As Jews, we recognize something deeply familiar in that reality. Not because our histories are the same, they are not the same, but because the experience of genocidal destruction leaves marks that are profoundly human and painfully enduring. I am reminded that in the summer of 2022, when US President Joe Biden came to Yad Vashem, I told him, Mr. President, if you want to understand Israel as a society and Israelis as individuals, from the president and the prime minister to the last Israeli, you should know that the Holocaust is omnipresent in the back of our minds. The same applies to Rwanda. The Holocaust was not only the murder of 6 million Jews. It was the attempt to destroy an entire civilization. There were communities, centuries-old Jewish communities, where life had flourished, prayer, study, music, argument, hope. After the war, many of those places remained physically standing, but the Jews were gone. Not transformed, not rebuilt, gone. I will have the privilege to meet in a few hours His Excellency President Paul Kagame. And I will present him with a book, the catalog of the artifacts in our synagogue in Yad Vashem. All those artifacts are from synagogues in Europe that were remained intact, but with no Jews to pray in them. At Yad Vashem, we try to restore names, faces, fragments of lives, but we know that what is missing is greater than what can be ever recovered. And this absence does not fade with time. It was in the midst of that destruction in 1934 that the Jewish jurist Raphael Lemkin coined the term genocide. Lemkin, who lost most of his own family in the Holocaust, understood that naming such crimes was essential, that only by defining them could humanity begin to confront them, to bring perpetrators to justice. He believed that awareness could lead to prevention. And yet, unfortunately, history has shown how difficult prevention is. In medicine, there is a phenomenon known as phantom pain. When a limb is lost, the body continues to feel its presence. The amputated leg still hurts. So is with genocide. The loss remains. The pain remains. It becomes part of who a people is. The Jewish people in Israel live with this. Rwanda live with this. For the Jewish people, the existence of the state of Israel is one answer to the vulnerability exposed by genocide, but it does not absolve us from the universal responsibility to others. And from this shared human condition, distinct but deeply resonant, a meaningful dialogue has emerged between us, Israel and Rwanda, Jews and Tutsi. That dialogue has taken shape not only between institutions, but also between people. In 2005, at the initiative of Rwandan genocide survivor Yolande Mukagasana, Yad Vashem hosted an encounter between survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi and Holocaust survivors. I met here in my visit to Kigali some of the participants in that encounter. The purpose was not to compare suffering, not to measure pain, not to measure who suffered more, but to sit together as human beings who had endured the unthinkable. A young Rwandan participant, Jean Bosco Wimana, who had lost his entire family in the genocide against the Tutsi, asked a Holocaust survivor 50 years older than him, Eliezer Sharon, whether he had ever freed himself from the trauma. The answer he received was simple and profound. My friend, you will have to fight against it all the time for the rest of your life. There is truth in that answer. Genocide leaves wounds that do not fully heal. But it also leaves responsibilities. Both our people had to learn not only how to remember, but how to live with memory. In Kinyarwanda, you say Ibuka. In Hebrew, we say Zachor. In Jewish tradition, remembrance is not passive. It's not a right. It's an obligation. Today, Wednesday, is the last day of Passover the week-long Jewish Festival of Freedom that recalls the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. At its heart, at the heart of Passover stands a commandment, Vehigadeta levincha, you shall tell your child. Remembrance must be transmitted from generation to generation so the truth is preserved and values endured. And here in Rwanda, one sees such commitment in the impressive way you commemorate, in the impressive way you educate, in the impressive way you have chosen to rebuild, in the rebuilding of institutions, in the pursuit of unity, and in the conscious rejection of the language of division. Rwanda today offers a powerful example to the world of what a society can strive for when memory is used not to perpetuate division, but to build responsibility and a shared future. This is not self-evident. This is not obvious. It is a choice. It is a choice you made. And I must tell you, it is a remarkable choice you made. In my recent private audience with Pope Leo XIV, barely 2 weeks ago in the Vatican, we spoke about the moral duty of remembrance. The Pope reflected that memory must not remain confined to the past. It must shape conscience and guide human behavior in the present, so that the imperative of never again may be translated into action. That insight of His Holiness the Pope resonates deeply here today, because remembrance also carries a warning. The world did not end genocide with the Holocaust. The world did not end genocide after the genocide against the Tutsis. Hatred, incitement, dehumanization of others still exists. They take different forms, but their essence remains the same. Even in Europe, the continent where the Holocaust took place, anti-Semitism did not disappear after 1945. It mutates, it adapts, but it re-emerges recently with alarming violence, reminding us that hatred, once unleashed, is never entirely gone. More than 80 years ago, in the Warsaw Ghetto, a Jewish educator named Avraham Levin wrote, and I quote, "Despite all the monstrous actions, I still believe in humankind. If humanity understands that the supreme holiness on this earth is that of life, then a new humanity will rise." Levin did not survive. He was murdered by the Nazis. But his words did. They speak not only to Jews, not only about the Holocaust. They speak to Rwanda, they speak to Israel, they speak to Europe, they speak to Africa, and to the entire world. They remind us that remembrance must lead to responsibility. Remembrance must lead to responsibility. Responsibility to defend life, responsibility to confront hatred, responsibility to act before it is too late. Remembering is not enough. Prevention requires vigilance, education, and the moral courage of states and leaders, the moral courage of states and leaders to act before hatred becomes violence. In Jewish tradition, we say, Yehi Zichram Baruch, may their memory be a blessing. I wish to conclude with a sacred word from your tradition, my Rwandan brothers and sisters. Tubibuke, let us remember them, and let our remembrance be expressed not only in words, but also in the courage to ensure that no people, anywhere, at any time, will ever again stand alone in the face of hatred. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your insightful remarks. Indeed, memory is an obligation. And to further discuss this topic, allow me to now proceed to our first panel, titled The Genocide Against the Tutsi and the Persistence of Genocide Ideology in the Region. We will now hear from 4 panelists. Kindly, when your name is called, kindly join me on the stage from the left-hand side next to the lectern, going forward. Monsieur Bruno Boudiguet is a researcher affiliated to the Yolande Mukagasana Foundation. He's a member of La Nuit Rwandaise review team. He regularly writes articles on the genocide against the Tutsi and conducted research on the topic for more than 10 years. Currently, he's writing a book on the execution of the genocide against the Tutsi. Mr. David Gakunzi, please join me on stage. He's an author who wrote multiple books on African memory. He's writing a book called Rencontre avec Julius Nyerere and published multiple articles on the genocide ideology and genocide denial. Maître Innocent Neziriayo is a founding member of the Collectif des Avocats des Partis Civils, a group that supports victims of human rights violations in Eastern DRC and represents them in judicial proceedings. He is the lawyer of Banyabulenge victims of the Gatumba massacres in 2004 in Burundi, seeking justice on behalf of the survivors. And finally, we'll be joined by Brigadier General Babacar Faye, who is a career officer in the Senegalese army with extensive field and crisis management experience. He was military observer in Rwanda with the group of neutral military observers, transferred to UNAMIR to oversee the implementation of the Arusha Accords. Based at Kigali Airport in April '94, he was the first to be informed of the crash of President Habyarimana's plane and became later on General Dalaire's aide-de-camp. To guide us with this important discussion, allow me to invite Ms. Sandra Shenge, who will serve as moderator. Ms. Shenge, over to you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Merci beaucoup. Votre Excellence, Madame la Première Dame du Rwanda, distingués invités dans vos qualités respectives et tout honneur gardé, alors que nous réfléchissons au génocide contre les Tutsis de 1994, nous nous rappelons non seulement les conséquences dévastatrices de la haine et de la division, mais aussi la responsabilité qui nous incombe aujourd'hui de prévenir qu'une telle atrocité ne puisse se reproduire un jour. Ce panel réunit des perspectives diverses, des expériences de vie, de la recherche, du travail de mémoire, mais aussi de la pratique juridique, afin de mieux comprendre les dynamiques du génocide et surtout de réfléchir à ce qui peut être fait pour y faire face. Avec nos panélistes, nous allons explorer les préoccupations les plus importantes liées à la persistance ou à la résurgence de l'idéologie du génocide, tel que ça a été évoqué ce matin. Je rappellerai donc, nous aurons 2 langues utilisées pendant les discussions, et je rappellerai donc encore une fois les chaînes pour les langues. So, channel number 1 is for English language, la chaîne numéro 2 est pour le français, et la chaîne numéro 3 est pour le Kinyarwanda. Et j'aimerais, pour commencer cette discussion, commencer avec vous, Général Faye. Ça a été dit, vous étiez au Rwanda en 1994 au moment du génocide, et j'aimerais, avec un regard en arrière sur le contexte de l'époque, que vous nous décriviez la situation la situation politique, mais aussi sécuritaire que vous avez trouvée au Rwanda au moment de votre arrivée en 1994. Est-ce qu'il existait des signes précurseurs de génocide à ce moment-là? À vous.
Chère modératrice, Je salue l'audience qui est là et c'est toujours avec beaucoup d'émotion qu'on parle ici des génocides. Je voudrais, avant, à l'entame de mon propos, saluer pour m'en honorer la présence de la Première Dame du Rwanda, qui est une combattante de la Première. Pour ceux qui ne le savent pas. À côté d'autres vaillantes Amazones à qui j'ai rendu hommage dans d'autres audiences pour leur contribution particulière à la libération du Rwanda. Je parle de vécu, c'est-à-dire qui a son ampleur de charge émotionnelle, avec des souvenirs qui nous habitent. Mais...
So as I was saying, memory is important. I'm here not as a historian from outside, but as a witness who was there. I was at the car of General Dallaire. I was his chief of staff, and I knew everything. And whenever there were issues or attacks and so on, everything went through me, but also the resistances, the difficulties that we had. And I know what Dallaire did, what he tried to do, what he couldn't do. The signals were clear. From 1973, we could see, we were deployed in Murindi, Ruhengeri, Byumba, and Kigali, and we could see the mechanism. It was a well-oiled mechanism. Everything was well organized. The weapons depots, the training of the Interahamwe, very well organized over all the hills. The systematic dehumanization of the target population. They were called Inyenzi, that is...
En son temps, son fameux télégramme.
Cockroaches and other insects. And the way they described in Hotanyi. So our mandate was to organize, or rather to inform. We informed. You remember our telegram, you've heard of our telegram of the 6th. There was no reply. Nobody heard us. Nothing happened. So this is what happened. This is what happened. Thank you very much, General Fai. Mr. Boudigue. Mr. Boudigue, you have worked on documentation on some documents, and I think you have analyzed a number of these documents, and you have a very, very clear idea of the reality of this genocide and what happened. And do you agree with the General Fai that there were signals before the genocide? Well, I thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Madam Kagame. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting us. You see, I'm going to talk about a book which I wrote, and it's a result of interviews with over 600 survivors. And I visited various places, where there were mass killings. I have photos, and I mapped all of that, and I also documented the weapons that were used against the Tutsi, but also especially against those who try to organize to defend themselves. And very many of them died heroically, but they were overwhelmed, of course. So a lot of research has been done everywhere. Now, I will say something about the Congo situation. There also, I have published a book with Luigi Longhi. He's now dead, It's about it's a book on disinformation in Congo, or because the disinformation in Congo is very, very special, because it's always Rwanda that is accused of all kinds of horrors. The genocide, they commit genocide, or they exploit people, they rape women, or whatever. It is absolutely striking that what we call the France Afrique, France and its network of Francophonie are sparing this. For example, Paul Baril was a former soldier. He was a soldier. But Paul Baril was a soldier, so a military actor, but also a propagandist. He was training, killing commandos, genociders, but he was also communicating. He was also informing. And he was always being interviewed at Europe 1, European. And he says the most fantastic things. Fantastical. This man, and it's very important to understand that. This man was Mobutu's security advisor, but also he worked with Honoré Ng'anda, who was a Minister of Defense, who later created, in the 90s, PARICO, which is an extremist group, which is also linked to, the whole network of Congo, that there is a group called Combattants Congolais. It's a criminal group, their role is killing people. And then, so there was also Pierre Péan, and Charles Onana, his disciple, I should say. These specialized in genocide negation, genocide denial. They are negationists. Abdoulaye Rodia, Patrick Buyaya, all those people have the same discourse. So, for example, there are 600. They say there are 6 million Congolese who were killed. The International Rescue Committee also published this report. It's a short report, a few pages. And when you look at it, and you hear they're talking about 6 million, in fact, what they want to say is that these people were victims of killings, but in fact they died of diseases. They just collected all the dead, dead people in that province who died, just happened to die. So we wonder whether the Congo government, especially from Mobutu onward, there was not already this idea of extremism. There are also a number of groups. As you know, there are hundreds of armed groups in Congo, very many indeed. And there's been a sort of inflation of numbers of victims. Now I think we started with 3 million, and then it was 6 million. 6 million. This number was chosen so that people keep thinking of the Shoah. 6 million. They wanted 6 million. But now it's, I think, now they say it's 20 million, even 20 million. And the various very serious media, normally very serious media, are also propagating these numbers. And do you remember, for example, a viral video of a woman called Tumosi? She was saying that these things are lies. And then, because I looked at those people, the people who are concerned, and I went to that doctor. Mukwege. I went to Dr. Mukwege, where he didn't reply to me. He didn't react. But I went to see gynecologists, for example, and they all of them said that there is no rape, there are no mass rapes, or no significant, or no more rapes than anywhere else. And there are, of course, there were rapes. Rape children were called intera hamwe. Intera hamwe. And these are related to the ex-FAR in Herahamwe. So anyway, I did these things. I did this research where they said, oh, you know, rape and mutilation and all sorts of things. There was nothing like that. Even I spoke to Immaculée Ingabire, the late Immaculée, and she said before '94, these atrocities, this sort of mutilation and atrocity didn't happen. In fact, the first one who was mutilated by the French soldiers, and even Baril testified about this. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is very interesting. And also the fact that you say that you surely show clearly that in Congo there are signals. We can see the hate speech matching.
Bruno just shared a few words about that, but how is it fueling genocide ideology today in the Great Lakes region? And more specifically, what can you share about incitement to violence, the killings, ethnic killings themselves, but also the issue of the Congolese Tutsi? I think you have some audiovisual support that you'd like to start with, and then you make a brief comments about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. Today we gather here to commemorate genocide against Tutsi in 1994. This moment is not only about remembrance, it's also a time to reflect on what is happening today in our region, particularly in DRC, which I'm going to focus on. Before playing the videos, short video for hate speeches, when I look at the audience, there's a mix of audience, but dominated by youth. I want to zoom a little bit and bring a little bit historical context of discrimination faced by Tutsi and Banyamulenge in DRC. I'll look at a colonial period and the post-colonial period briefly. Already in 1993, the Banyamulenge chiefdom was dismounted and transferred to other tribe called the Bafuliru. This marked the beginning of the conflict, as Banyamulenge were increasingly treated as stateless. In DRC, all the tribes are linked with the Sheferi, what we call Sheferi, which is the territory or chiefdom. In 1972, there was citizenship law number 72002, recognized people of Rwandan and Burundian origin who arrived from 1950 as Congolese citizens. After only 10 years, in 1981, citizenship law number 81002 revoked those rights, stated only group present in 1885 were Congolese. This law created confusion and led to discrimination against Kinyarwanda speakers in DRC. Between 1991 and 1992 was the national conference, what they called the Conference Souveraine. Instead of resolving the issue, it further questioned the nationality of Rwandan-speaking communities, including Tutsi Banyamulenge. In 1994, after genocide against Tutsi in Rwanda, the genocidaires did not cross only with the weapons. They have also crossed with the genocide ideology against Tutsi and in Tutsi Congolese, already affected by discrimination. Few examples to emphasize this. In 1995, in Uvira, the commissioner called Shweka ordered Banyamulenge to leave Uvira, and they started seizing their property. 1996, the governor of Bukavu, called the Lwasi Lwabanji Ngabo, gave Tutsi Banyamulenge 1 week to leave the country. And this was followed by massive killing Tutsi Banyamulenge in different villages, such as Bibogobogo, Kabela, Uvira, and many other places in DRC. Yesterday, we listened to well-documented evidence presented by His Excellency Paul Kagame and the Minister Dr. Bizimana about the genocide and hate speech. To emphasize this, let us watch a short video as an example among 100 videos. I'll request the team just to play a video, then I'll come up with the consequence of this video. Thank you so much.
Et le temps que vous voulez que je chiffre dépend de la résistance des méthodes, mais pour ce qui nous concerne, nous sommes décidés à utiliser la médication la plus efficace. Quand tu vas incriminer. Il faut se méfier de l'outil. Il faut se méfier. C'est le même principe Oscar, le perfidie, qui fait que lorsque vous épousez aujourd'hui une femme, tout il faut faire attention. Oui, il faut faire attention parce que si vous êtes responsable, et c'est ce qu'ils ont fait avec les chefs coutumiers, les grands chefs coutumiers un peu partout, on vous donne une femme, mais vous allez recevoir un membre de la famille, un cousin, un neveu qui viendra chez vous, de la famille de la femme. Et on va vous présenter comme le neveu et le cousin, alors que ce n'est pas un neveu, ce n'est pas un cousin, c'est la personne qui viendra faire les enfants avec votre épouse à la maison. Et on vous dira que non, les enfants naissent Tutsi comme des Tutsi parce que la race Tutsi est supérieure, alors c'est une perfidie. Si on ne réussit pas par les armes et les bombardements, on peut vous avoir dans une salle d'opération. Tu vois qu'il faut la pamis. Ces gens sont des cafards, sont des infiltrés. Ce sont des virus. Quand il y a des virus, on cherche à tuer les virus. On ne regarde pas, sinon il va être contagieux. Quand on voit un cafard, il faut directement les tuer, sinon ils vont devenir nombreux et ils vont vous envahir. C'est tout. Il va se lancer un Rwandais. On suit ce mouvement, on voit qu'il est en train de parler de la Rwanda.
Merci.
Thank you.
Si vous voulez bien, je reviendrai vers vous dans un instant.
I'll come back to you just to make comments on those images, but I would like to request David, just around the same question, on that resurgence of the ideology, that kind of messages that keep coming back. Now, what can you tell us regarding the current situation in relation to the genocide ideology? How does it evolve in Europe and elsewhere? And what are the main channels of dissemination of such messages? What is the current situation in Europe and elsewhere? Good morning. Thank you. We cannot understand the evolution of the genocide ideology in Europe if we do not understand the evolution of the genocide ideology in the region. Because in this region, the genocide ideology started from here, then went to Kivu, but there is a kind of nationalization of the genocide ideology in Congo. The hatred against Rwanda and Tutsi has become the principle of building of national unity in the DRC. So, the construction of the nation, or the building of the nation building in Congo has become like a principle of purification in Congo. That is, they want actually to get rid of the Rwandan-speaking population and the Tutsis. So, the appointing of that target group as being guilty from their birth. And behind that, the idea is to find the national balance. Then they have actually to sanitize nationally. They have to exterminate, that group. So in Europe, the evolution of the genocide ideology followed that same speech on, the genocide in this region, using the same methods. What are those methods? They repeated the language and the symbols used by during the genocide. So now they reverse everything. They use it to reverse guilt. For instance, they say that there is a genocost. For instance, genocide is no longer the implementation of an ideology targeting the extermination of a group, but actually they talk about, having wealth and producing deaths. So actually they changed the meaning of the genocide. A few weeks ago, there was a conference in France, a conference organized by a group called Les Justes du Congo. So they are using actually the same language to commit genocide. So those people call themselves the Les Justes. These are people who actually who did not save anybody, and they are not even ready to save anybody. So there has been some evolution using the same language, the same as we find in the region. And now, we have actually the vectors. We have the researchers that are known, researchers that used to come to Rwanda, that would determine even the official speech. So actually they have nostalgia regarding what they used to do. So we have researchers that come with a lot of arrogance. They believe they know the situation of Rwandans more than the Rwandans. We also have the media. Media are not actually guided by the search for evidence. Actually, they want to find evidence that will, confirm their actually bias. So, you have the media, the diaspora. So there is always that will to try to reverse. They distort the reality, but they also want to reverse the guilt. And by the same time, I would say that this is actually more worrying. So all that dynamics can be translated into policies. And in policies, there is that speech, the international law that they are using. But what they don't know that, in international law, we also have aspects of fighting against genocide. But they are using that idea of the international law that is violated in the Great Lakes region, but actually want to stigmatize Rwanda. And by the same time, the positive aspect is that we have friends. We have researchers that work to preserve the memory. They are working on reminding us about the facts and evidence. And there is also, in France, for instance, a few years ago, Paris was actually the capital city of genocide denial. But now there has been a lot of changes. And we have a lot of associations that are mobilized. I was talking to the director of the Shoah Memorial. We have a lot of Jewish communities that have mobilized to establish the truth. So we didn't have a lot to say to be understood. Because now these friends know what has happened. Now, to summarize, we cannot understand what is happening in Europe when we don't understand what is happening in this region. Let me conclude by this last point. The minister talked about the responsibility in Africa. You know, the responsibility of African diasporas. We have genocide, a denying speech, you know, actually even among the Pan-Africanists. But those are not the heirs of Kwame Nkrumah or Julius Nyerere or William de Bosch, but these are people with a xenophobic speech, actually hatred speech. They are actually repeating the you know, these theories of Bantus, Hamites, you know, these are not Pan-Africanists. Actually, they are actually coming with this hatred speech. Thank you for your sharing with us.
Putting also that new aspect of international law, I'd like you to, first of all, comment briefly on the video, the previous video, but also share a bit about that perspective of international law. What recourse is available to victims of these atrocities? Are existing legal frameworks even sufficient to make sure that we speak to those challenges that David just put very well to us?
Thank you. Before discussing about the legal challenge or legal framework available for the victims, I would like to link this video and hate speech, which has led directly to horrific acts, including cannibalism. In this video, the common things all the hate speech spreader they shared, they all describe Tutsi Banyamulenge as enemies, foreigners, invaders, cockroaches, born criminals. Such language called for their exclusion or elimination. Few examples. In 18 April 2022, in a place called Kivumini Minembwe, 2 women were tortured, mutilated because only they are Tutsis. 30 June 2021, 4 women were killed during a peaceful protest because of their husband were arrested. They killed, they shoot, the DRC government shoot those women publicly in daylight. October 2022, a 14-year-old called Mugaza was mutilated and killed. December 2021 in Lueba, Major Kaminzobe Joseph was launched, banned, and eaten. The same Captain Gisore Kabongo, November 2023, he was also lynched and banned live here close in Goma. Same March 2024, Officer Sevandore was beaten and banned live across here next door in Goma. Hundreds of Banyamulenge are detained without a trial in Kinshasa based on their identity. After M23 force left Uvira, violence was intensified. Over 70 houses in Banyamulenge and churches were destroyed. Today, even yesterday, there's a drone over the Banyamulenge. Blockish since last year. The Banyamulenge don't have even sugar basic needs. But during this journey, our team, we documented all the evidence. We filed the cases in different courts, region courts. We started by DRC court in 2021, alerting this violence. We went through the region court, East African Court for Justice. We went in international court, including those who has a universal jurisdiction in Brussels, which at least in Brussels they made a little bit progress. Belgium was the center of the hate speech, online hate speech. We documented such hate speech. We engaged with prosecution of Brussels. When they started to investigate such atrocities, all the video messages, hate speeches was online. All the perpetrators, they moved on social media. Unfortunately, we have already documented them, download them. Till today, we are waiting for justice.
All right. So,
Can I continue?
The last one?
Okay, the last one. The legal framework is not an issue. There is a million texts about genocide prevention, as the minister stated. ICC has very good law written in their books. The domestic law, they have very good law written about hate speech and public incitement about genocide, but the implementation is an issue. The political will is an issue. I believe in Rwanda, nobody can attempt to escalate or can attempt to say anything about hate speech because the law is clear and you'll be prosecuted. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. So, General Fay, I would like to come back to you. J'aimerais revenir vers vous.
General Fay, I would like to come back to you regarding those issues we are talking about. You know, what are the lessons learned? From collaborative research. How we can put in place legal frameworks that can help. But what about the lessons learned by the international community? So my question is, what is the responsibility of international actors, including peace-building missions, because I know that you are very much experienced in prevention of the normalization of the genocide speech. We have seen it in videos. What are the responsibilities of international actors? Thank you very much. Thank you. If you can see what have been said, the comparison with what is happening in Eastern DRC, this is quite troubling. In 1994, we had Radio Mille Collines, but today we have social media, targeting Banyamulenge and the Congolese Tutsis. The list of people that are targeted has been actually replaced by, public calls to kill. The Interahamwe today have got their equivalent in the armed militias. They have a structured ideology. We are talking about FDLR, Wazalendo, and all that silent population living with people who have been, made instruments of hatred. And the UN paralysis is still the same. MONUSCO has got an offensive mandate, but they don't have the means to implement it. That was the same for UNAMIR. UNAMIR wanted to implement a mandate that was not that was not theirs. Now, the difference with Rwanda today is that now, we have 9 countries that are involved. We have mining interests that are fueling for conflicts and the presence of M23 and regional ramifications. Now, that's where we have the danger, and complacency should not be an alibi for inaction. In 1994, we understood that there was complacency, and that was an excuse. But today, we can see the signs. Have we understood it? I don't think so. When we look at the reports by groups of experts are produced, but we have seen what that silence is all about. Now, to talk about the responsibility of international actors. So they have full responsibility, and it has to start with genocide starts with ideas. the international community is responsible about what has happened in Rwanda in 1994. That was not a failure of information. We had information. That was a failure of political will, aggravated by, regional interests that were not interests of Africans. For peace missions, the mandate under Chapter 6, observation, supervision, that is not adapted when we are faced with genocide. When we had to protect civilians and refugees, the UN actually told us to leave them. So it was not part of the mandate. So actually, when we left, we left them to be killed. So we left with the refugees that we have harbored. Now, I think we need to agree on three things. We need to adapt. The UN machinery is so slow when there are changes on the field. Genocide does not wait. So does not wait for the deliberations of the Security Council. The hatred speech, we need to consider it as it has to be treated as an act of physical violence, because it is a preparation of the genocide. And the last element is impunity. And it is actually the fuel of genocide. When the authors are not tried, the ideology continues. That's why we need to come up with concrete actions so that we can actually, fight genocide. Now, action has to be done. We have all the elements, but we need to act. We need to sue the authors in front of tribunals, but we need to come up with mechanisms to stop those actions. Thank you. So actions are missing. So we wish to give the floor to the audience, but I would like to hear you make a call to action. Just in one sentence, Bruno, up to Genocide, in one sentence, what is your call to action? Bruno? Bruno? Well, I think I would like to talk to people who are in Europe or elsewhere, people who are against colonialism and racism. I want to tell them, don't be mistaken. There's a writer who said you need to listen. I think that's what you need to do. And for our politicians, we need to talk to the MPs. They should not actually repeat the same mistakes, because in Congo, for instance, France, even though that France has recognized its role in the genocide against the Tutsis, but the official policy on Congo, I think that, I don't know, they have really learned from their lessons of the past. I think that we have three lessons. The first lesson is that if somebody is threatening for extermination and you don't take them seriously, you don't act, then I think we are not going anywhere. If there is, a speech, threats, that is actually the beginning of genocide. You need to act. Secondly, one of the major things, it is the public opinion. If the public opinion is aware, in some countries in Europe, politicians have to take that into account. But if we are not able to fight for the truth, then the politicians are not able to follow. So we need to work for memory and also for the truth. And the history of Rwanda shows us that we need to count on ourselves, and you have done so well, and I trust you. You are actually doing that, you are fighting genocide. And for us who are outside Rwanda, what we can do, I always say that, fighting racism is the fight by all the humanity. Anti-Semitism is a fight not only for the Jews, but it is for the humanity. So the fight against genocide has to be the concern for all the humanity. And we need to make sure that we create support communities and alliance communities in that regard. Thank you.
Innocent, what is your call for action?
Thank you. I was inspired by Jean Carbonard during his interview when he did some investigation in Rwanda in 1993, where he clearly explained the suffering of Tutsi in 1994. He described what he saw: Tutsi villages being destroyed and women who had been raped. He notably gave the example of the women whose 4 children has been killed. Today, the similar things is happening to Tutsi Banyamulenge in DRC. In my conclusion, I request this audience to act now to stop the suffering of Tutsi Banyamulenge in DRC, living under blockage, everyday bombardment, non-stop. Anyone from this audience, you can do something to change the life of Tutsi Banyamulenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Votre tour, Général Fay.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que...
Thank you very much. I think there are 2 priorities for today. I had 6, but I think I have reduced them to 2. An early warning system, but it has to be a mechanism for early warning. Everything that is said, that is written, or that you find in social media has to be recorded so that there is information. Second, a regional observatory of hate speech, so that all these are documented and they are filed and they are sent up to those who cannot. Also, a sanction. Well, I mean, not a sanction system, but I should say a tribunal, a specialized tribunal to fight against impunity, because impunity is what feeds genocide. So there has to be international and national, regional jurisdictions to punish, because punishing is also a means of prevention. We have seen that, for example, in Senegal, we know that a person who, especially an officer who cannot tell the difference between a normal speech and hate speech, it's a very serious problem. They have to be taught. So that they understand, so that they no longer bandy those words. Now, thank you very much. I think this is what I had to say. Rwanda, Senegal, long live both countries. Thank you very much. Now, I think we'll give the floor to questions. Questions from the room.
Any question? Twagira ngo rero dushake noneho inyunganizi zabo turi kumwe hano muri salle.
So, don't.
I see on my right. Phyllis, you can start, and after you, we will give an opportunity to others. Thank you. My name is Silas Namfra Isheri. I was a soldier during the regime of Habyarimana, and until the 10th of April, '94, during the genocide when I ran away to Burundi. I ran away from the leadership of the military barracks because they had decided to take my life.
because I had helped Tutsis to flee when we arrived in Burundi. During the genocide, I was lucky to escape, but we went through very difficult times, and we witnessed horrors against the Tutsi. I did not witness this only within the armed forces, but from the age of 13, in 1982, I started seeing persecution of Tutsis at the school, at the primary school, where I was. A young girl had to abandon her studies. Today, she is alive. She's older, of course, but I witnessed what happened to her. Remember that no war was happening in the country. We thought we lived in peace, but what happened to her, what was done to her by other children, was not something that children spontaneously came up with. This came from their parents. It's clear that the ideology that led to the genocide in '94 was existent as I was growing up. As you can see, this was translated into action when I was 13, meaning even before that, the genocide ideology was there. We heard that in '92 some refugees came back to Rwanda voluntarily, but they were sent back, chased from Rwanda. Therefore, the '94 genocide against the Tutsi was not triggered by the shooting down of the aircraft, as some people suggest, but it is derived from the dehumanization of Tutsis. They were being told that Tutsis came from Ethiopia. Within the army, there was an order that no soldier should marry a Tutsi, and if you didn't obey, you were bound to lose trust within the army. Those instructions were followed to the extent that Tutsis were not considered citizens, 100% citizens or humans. Sometimes I reflect on one thing. During the genocide, everybody knows this, the Belgians used to tell us that they are also Tutsis. They used to tell us that the Belgians are Tutsis and they are accomplices. We were being told that they are bad people. That's why they were killed in Kigali barracks. It was not by accident that they were killed. We had been sensitized and instructed. We were being told that the Belgians work with the Tutsis. I think General Faye knows this for having been a member of UNAMIR, how the Belgians were considered. We used to point them and calling them names and saying they are accomplices of the Tutsis. The representative of the Secretary General of the UN said it. The genocide engenders responsibility. The international community should show responsibility. When you see signs of it, you should do something immediately. I don't know if we will wait until the genocide has started in broad daylight, like that happened in Rwanda, before they act. You know, there were rehearsals, there were trials. In Rwanda, Tutsis were killed in '92. I was in Bugesera. Tutsis were killed. Tutsis were expelled. Horrible things happened. And the international organizations were there observing, and they did nothing. I think the international community should not remain silent as it remained silent during the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. The friend from Israel said that you cannot relax when there are people who have made it their objective to exterminate you. Thank you. We will take 3 more questions from the hall. One on my middle and one on my left. Yolande and Gatete.
Okay. Quoi? Yolande. Je suis Yolande Mukagasana. I'm Yolande Mukagasana, and I am a writer, and I document. I document my life as a survivor. You know what I think? One thing I don't like is when they talk about laws, international law, genocide convention, and I don't know what else. This ideology is still current. These conventions did nothing. You know, it's like asking. It's like asking whether the survivors have healed. Jews, have you healed from the genocide, the Holocaust? Or Rwandans, Tutsi, have you healed? Are you okay now? No, no. Because they are planning, they are still planning to kill the next generations, the generations that are still suffering transgeneration trauma. Mais aussi the transgenerational criminality that also gets transmitted to generations, you know. And then, of course, you know, the UN, international law, you know, you have to arrest and then take to court. I don't know. Why don't you begin by stopping the genocide, and then you can think of genocide? Because you see, if when you are dead, what's the point of our court for you? So, from 5, I'm now 72. From the age 5, those conventions existed, laws, conventions. You talk of systems, I don't know, observatories and so on. The Tutsis in Congo are being eaten, killed, and then eaten. Why aren't you acting and you're talking about laws? I said, so Gatete, 30 seconds. And then somebody at the back. Okay, can you do it in 30 seconds? Thank you very much. Thank you. How many times have we heard? Why do we commemorate? Why don't you pass on? You know, this is said. How many times are you going to remain mourning? You see, sometimes I wonder, because genocide denial is also encouraged by racism. There is a racism that is very deeply anchored in the minds. But I think that they don't understand why we keep remembering our dead. They don't understand. I'll give you an example. In Ituri, the forest in northern Congo, northeastern Congo, I mean, there are so many people who die there in Ituri. Nobody thinks this is an issue. They don't bother with these killings. You see, remember this ideology? There was an ideology, you know, the Ten Commandments of the Hutus. He said, oh, those Tutsis are funny. They always remember things. They always remember things. And that still keeps going on. Why do you people keep thinking about these things and keep... Because you see, but if you don't remember, then you will think that it's a matter of riches. Oh, you see, sometimes, for example, somebody goes in Congo to save a family, a village that was being decimated, and the news say, "Oh no, this place is rich in coltan, tungsten, resources." It's the same thing. They say if you do that, it's because you want things. You don't want to save lives. So 30 years later, people do not understand why Rwanda should go and save these victims in Congo for humanitarian reasons. They say, oh, no, these people go there for money, you know, for resources, or gas, or, petroleum and so on. Always, always, always. So you Africans, I'm not talking about the international community. I'm talking to you Africans. Please, you who should understand this, you should understand life. You should understand what is happening in Congo. Why don't you speak for the victims and not just for the resources? Thank you very much. Anybody else? There's somebody at the in the center over there. Yes.
You can express yourself in English. No mu Kinyarwanda.
Thank you. I'll speak in Kinyarwanda. My name is Ntamuhanga. I am a journalist. I would like to say first ask the chairman of the Shoah Remembrance Center in Israel. He said that from generation to generation, the Jews have for more than 150 generations have resisted and have taught their own children for more than 3,000 years, have been teaching their children generation after generation how to remember. I would like to ask him, what methods have they used, what have they done that Rwandans can learn from? What lessons can they share with Rwandans regarding remembering from generation to generations? Then I would like to ask General Fai, the teachers in schools and universities and the members of the armed forces of the past, I call them the wise people, the wise men who contributed a lot. What would they like to tell the younger generations? Third, what can be done by the UN? How can funds be gathered to fight the genocide ideology in the Great Lakes region, starting from the Belgians and the French, and the UN that continued to be inactive. The Belgians and the French today are have been the biggest problem in this region. We have two people on that side. I see a young person with a raised hand. I will start with you. And then there'll be his friend. I'd like to encourage ladies to also raise their hand because we want to know what you think. My name is Bizimana Didier. I'm a student at Kigali Independent University. Our daddy asked a question regarding the transmission of the memory from generation to generation. But we have an answer. Myself and my fellow young people, we have an answer. If possible, please connect us, because there are very many young people who don't know our history. Please. Make it possible for us to meet others so that we can share that solution. Yes, I see another hand. The last thought, and then we'll conclude.
Virginia, student at the Kigali Independent University. I would like to say thanks to the panelists and the moderator. I have a very important question. As a Liberian and an international student, it is actually important that we learn from past events. So my question actually has to do with international community ignoring early warning signs of genocide. We have seen so many instances where the international community were clearly aware of early warning signs. They saw these warning signs, but then they delay, they ignore these warning signs, and then sadly, these terrible events occur. So I would like to ask, what do you think the people on the ground, the people who are affected, what do you think are actions that they can take when they see when they are seeing these early warning signs in their areas? What are actions do you panelists think the people can take, and how can they take this action? Actually, I would like to learn from this so that we as young people can prevent future occurrence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So one last question, maybe to the front, if you don't mind. We'll have a break, and you'll have plenty of time to engage with our panelists, if you don't mind. So, yes, one last here, and then, yes, madam.
Murakoze kumpa ijambo. Ndashaka ku ijambo ikibazo ufite ndashaka.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I would like to ask my question to the representative of the United Nations who is responsible for the prevention of genocide. And he says that this role was created because they realized that nothing was done when the genocide was committed here in Rwanda. In '94, the international community was there. They had all the news and they had seen all the warning signs, but and they had forces on the ground. We know what happened at Oito Chichokiru. The UN remained inactive, did nothing until the genocide was committed. Today, the same thing is happening. The genocidaires everywhere in countries that are members of the United Nations are free. Rwanda has pleaded, Rwanda has advocated that they be arrested, and still justice is not being done. My question, what are you promising us? What are you doing? We see all the warning signs. They have moved to the DRC. We can see that. Nobody's drawing any lessons. The same things that happen in Rwanda are being observed there. Nothing was done in Rwanda. What is going to be done in Congo? What does the UN plan to do against this?
To stop here for the questions, I'm really sorry, but we have plenty of time to, as I was saying, to network during lunch break and other break times that are scheduled. Nous aurons le temps d'échanger avec les panélistes, avec d'autres participants.
So we'll have time to discuss with the different panelists, so we shall have enough time.
An opportunity to keep networking and ask more questions, but there are two questions we'd like to have addressed here, including Diane's question.
To you, I'd like to give you a few minutes to react on them, and also General Fay. Il y a aussi 2-3 questions qui vous ont été.
There are 2 or 3 questions for General Fay.
Thank you so much. It has been an extremely interesting panel. Thank you to all of you. Obviously, it's very different the way you remember and you convey to the next generations an event that happened more than 3,000 years ago, like the liberation of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt that I mentioned in my speech, to the way to commemorate an event that happened in the 20th century, the Holocaust. But you know, I mentioned that we are in the last day of the week-long Jewish festival of Pesach, or Passover in English. What we do is a Jewish tradition that exists for millennia. Every single year, at a certain date, we convene in our homes, the entire family, and repeat the story of the liberation of the Israelites from Egypt. Year after year, the same story, the same book, we read from the same book, but believe me, nothing is more educating for the children, for the young generations, than doing that, also with good food, etc. But this is a Jewish tradition that we cherish very much, and I think has been extremely effective in remembering our past. But I think it's more important to us to answer about the recent history, about how we make sure that the tragedy of the Holocaust in our case, and in your case, the tragedy of the genocide against the Tutsi, is remembered and never forgotten. And I think that the first imperative is obviously education. In Yad Vashem, we established the International School of Holocaust Education, which trains teachers in Israel and abroad in dozens of countries about how to teach about the Holocaust, how to educate about the Holocaust. And I think, as I said to the minister, and I will say also to the president, we are eager to cooperate with Rwanda to do the same, with the differences necessary, of course, in different circumstances. But we will be more than privileged. We will be privileged if we can assist Rwanda in doing that. And the second thing that I would like to mention is documentation. It's imperative that Rwanda continues to document every single facet of the genocide against the Tutsi. The persons that were murdered, the stories of rescue, documentation of the incitement that preceded the genocide against the Tutsi, artifacts that are related to the genocide against the Tutsi. Everything, nothing is non-important. Everything that is related to that tragic event is important. And I say that because we have a perspective that probably you don't see it yet, but believe me, you will. We are in the Jewish people, regarding to the Holocaust, we are in what we refer to as the crossroads of generations. The formative experience that we all had in Holocaust literacy, Holocaust education, is to listen to a survivor. Listening to a survivor is like standing on a bridge that one end of the bridge is in front of us and the other end of the bridge is in Auschwitz.
Right.
That privilege will be, the next generation will not have it. Children that are born today will never meet a survivor.
Yes.
And I think that Rwanda at some point will reach that point. Therefore, documentation is extremely important. Authenticity is extremely important.
Right.
And when that happens, when there are no more survivors because of biological reasons, that will be the happy hour of the denialists and the distortionists. And you need a strong base of authentic documentation, authentic testimonies, in order to prevail against those that want to deny, distort, and minimize the genocide against the Tutsi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Documentation of testimonies and education, very key. General Faye, à vous maintenant pour la toute dernière.
For the last minute, would you talk us about talk about the heritage to the next generation? So you talked about the Belgian soldiers who were treated as Tutsis. Very quickly, can you make a comment on that and tell us about the heritage to the young ones? And thank you very much. And I followed closely what Emmanuel and Yolande said. Yes, indeed. Just to make a comparison with the presence of the Belgians. This is the story of the Belgians. This is history. You know, the closeness between Rwanda and Belgium, because Rwanda was colonized by Belgium, and so many Belgians were married to Rwandan Tutsis, and some people actually made a comparison. When we came, when the plane was sent, they were suspecting Belgians to be part of the conspiracy to destroy that plane. So those are ideas among the populations, and Belgians were assimilated to the Tutsis. And in the first hours of the genocide, the 10 Belgians were killed. Actually, that even pushed for the withdrawal of Belgium from the UN mission. And I would like to say that Belgium was the spinal cord of the UNAMIR. So they killed 10 Belgians, and the public opinion could not accept the presence of the Belgians here, which means that today it's important that Africa should wake up, and they need to say that our solution will not depend on Europe or the US, it will depend on us. So when those countries will start losing, they will not. It is important for Africans to be organized so that they can have this approach of protecting Africans. So just to answer to Emmanuel, in history, in military academies, we have a basic course. We have a course called military history. So when we are teaching the cadets, systematically we teach them based on a fact. So actually we learn from what has succeeded or what has not succeeded in history. So in military history actually help us to create armies, and we have a reference for the new generations so that every time they will have to intervene, they will know that among my ancestors so and so did this, so I have to do it. So this is a firm foundation in the behavior of men. History will help us to format citizens. Format will help us to create citizens, and what we are doing has to be perpetuated. We have to do it, we have to do it every time, on and on, so that what happened in 1994 should not happen again. So that's how people have been victimized. That's how people lost their lives. So we need to keep on, that history. Thank you for your kind attention. I wish to thank you and want to tell you that silence is not an option. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We thank our panelists for their insightful remarks and the engaging discussion from the public. We will now take a short break of 10 minutes. Kindly be back in the room by 12:30, please. Thank you. Nous allons prendre une courte pause de 15 minutes.
Let's have a short break of 5 minutes, and then we come back to the room within 5 minutes at 12:30. Thank you.
Genocide yakorewe abatutsi mushyinguye mu mitima yacu mu mahoro ya Kristo.
Merci.
We'll now step into the second part of this morning's program with our second panel titled Survival and Resilience, Hope for the Future. This session will focus on the lived experience of survivors, the role of memory, and how resilience continues to shape the future. I invite Mr. Mark Nwamaka, who will moderate this session, to introduce the panelists. Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Your Excellency, the First Lady, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, survivors, all protocol observed. We gather today to not only remember history that the world must never be allowed to forget, but to witness an extraordinary power of humanity and human spirit to rebuild from ashes. Our second panel, Survival and Resilience, Hope for the Future, bridges the gap between the pain of the past and the promise of tomorrow. With the panelists who are present today, we'll see that resilience is not just a passive state, it is an active daily choice. It is found in the courage of a survivor choosing to live again and contribute to national healing. It is found in the determination of activists who fight denial in foreign lands, and it is found in the stone and bronze of memorials that stand as silent sentinels of truth. To explore this, we're joined by this remarkable panel. Starting with Eric Murangwa, Eugene, MBE, founder of Ishami Foundation, active in genocide education and commemoration, especially in the UK. He will focus on the urgent challenge of preserving accurate memory of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Western diaspora and civil society spaces, where distortion and denial continue to erode the historical record and embolden genocide ideology. We're also joined with Dr. Damas Dukundane, a physician-oncologist at King Faisal Hospital, a genocide survivor from Kaduha, saved by Sister Milgita Kosa, a German nun who became Umurinzi w'Igihango. He's a former IRG member. He embodies youth and the future. He will focus on resilience and hope for the future. We also have Dr. James Smith, founder of Aegis Trust. Dr. James Smith, CBE, is a pioneer genocide prevention leader who transitioned from a medical doctor to a global advocate for memory and reconciliation. As the founder and the chairman of Aegis Trust and co-founder of the UK National Holocaust Center, he's played a pivotal role in establishing landmark institutions. He's also developed internationally recognized peace education program used worldwide. His work focuses on the role of education, managing memory through education, and memorial site management. We also have Madame Jeanne Allaire Kaidirgwa. She's a founding member of Ibuka France, involved in the partnership between Ibuka and the City Hall in Paris, the erection of genocide memorials in Paris and other parts of France, and genocide justice. She will speak about this path of resilience abroad. And I'm going to start with you, Jeanne Allaire Kaidirgwa. Vous avez vécu plusieurs années en France où vous avez collaboré.
So you lived in France for a long time, and you do what you can to, to perpetuate commemoration through Ibuka, France, and in relation or in connection with Ibuka, Rwanda. Ibuka means remember. So now Macron is in power, but you started before. Has anything changed? Has anything been done? Something that we should recognize that you have done personally and your group. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I think Ibuka France in 2002, when it was founded, there was a big gap. And that gap were filled by disinformation. And there was a lot of denial, genocide denial, promoted by politicians, high-level politicians, plus old soldiers who were in the turquoise operation, and also academics. a lot of them, very powerful and influential, so that anything that we wanted to do at the time was negated, was even suppressed. For example, you see, I'll give you an example. For example, when we founded our association, we wanted to get insurance. For example, for people who wanted to, to hire, to rent us rooms. No, we couldn't. We were not insured. There were churches, Catholic churches in France. We asked for a mass for the genocide survivors, or rather the dead, of course. And they say, no, this is political. So the churches wouldn't allow us. Also, in 2003 and 2004 especially, we wanted in Paris to gather together to commemorate our victims. And they wouldn't let us. The prefecture of Paris, they say, for example, there was a federation called European Rwandan Federation. These were negationists or genocide survivors. They commemorated on the 6th April. They were allowed, but we're not allowed because they were commemorating, the death of Habyarimana and the crash. But they wouldn't let us. And that is the Paris prefecture, the Paris municipality. But we had help. Survie, SOS Racisme, the Association of Jewish Students in France, and also even the Yad Vashem helped us and others. And they helped us, and we push and we push and we push, and eventually they accept us. Mr. Vershav, Jean Chrétien, Saint-Exupéry, these are journalists. But also other people who were very helpful, Madeleine Mukamano, José Kagabo, the late José Kagabo, Dupaquier, all these people were very active and supported us. And for example, we were able to sue Pierre Péan in his book, it's not much of a book, it's a collection of nasty things. We were not able to go to court. We didn't have the capacity as a body. We didn't have proper legal personality, but they helped us, and they did it on our behalf. So these are the problems that we have had, but we did manage to exist and be visible in French society, and eventually the various local authorities were sensitive to our demand for areas to be created for commemoration in the various prefectures and communes, the local authorities, because the national level was still closed. But the first one to accept that was a small area called Cluny, and then Dieu le Fils was the second. Jean Carbonari was very active there. And then in the south, Berg and others. So we started by this small area that understood what we wanted and went on spreading. But at the national level, for example, when Anne Hidalgo was mayor of Paris, we were able to have a commemorative stele, a commemorative a stone where we could inscribe our message, commemorative plaque. And then this area that we were able to build around this stela was able to we were given it, and we were allowed to gather there every year. So that was something. That's one point. And then the second one, this one is dedicated to Bisesero. The Bisesero. The Bisesero resistance. So that is another place that will be a central point for commemoration, for memory. So Montpellier, Strasbourg, Toulouse, Lyon, Rouen also. Rouen has a lot of negative messages because we have a lot of genocide denials there in the city of Rouen. But there are others. That's not the only one. But we're continuing. This monument, we think this monument campaign will help. So as you said, moderator, you're right to say that when Macron came to power, there were changes for us. Less genocide denialism, a little less, I should say. But when Ibuka was received, we had an audience with him as an association. And after that, things improved because we told him that there should be a national commemoration day, and he accepted that. He said there should be a day that you should commemorate, all of you. And we do. We do. So all those places where we were able to get throughout the country, we, through friends, especially other social groups, like institutions, but there were also some leaders who were for us. So this is what we're able to do. Thank you very much. So, okay.
About preservation and the voice of a survivor. And we're seeing in various diaspora spaces a shift where denial is moving to subtle forms of memory erosion. How can us, in your case, Ishami Foundation, the organization that you work with and you founded, ensure the authentic voice of a survivor and ensure that it remains the primary authority in these spaces?
Thank you, Mark. Let me start by saying that we at Ishami Foundation, we have learned that protecting survivor voices requires more than just remembering. It requires structure, it requires partnership, it requires care, and this is how we have tried to operate back in the UK, where we've established this working system of taking survivors into schools to make sure that the authenticity of their testimonies are shared and given to the young people at the very early stages, to make sure that the young people who encounter survivors understand the difference between the real stories and what they read in books or what they listen in different places. So we have tried to do that for a number of years by creating safe and supportive spaces for survivors to be able to share their stories. We've provided practical resources such as survivor talk guidance that help these survivor speakers to go and share their stories. Because we also know that sharing these stories, it's not easy. It demands some support. It demands some structures, as I said. So over the last 10 or so years that we've done this, we've been able, for example, to partner with different institutions in the UK. I will mention one or two. We've partnered with a school called Hampton School. It's a school based in London, and through their initiative of young people, they've established an incredible network that has allowed young people to come together, mobilize one another, and engage a huge, big network of young people, where more than 100 schools have been able to have access to survivor stories, going in those schools and sharing their stories. We've also collaborated with London King's College to make sure that the work we do is also grounded in research. We've partnered with Holocaust Memorial Day Trust to make sure that the Rwandan voices are given a place in a global remembrance spaces. So through all these things that we've been able to do, I can say that more than 50,000 young people in the UK have been able to be reached through either a survivor going into school to share that story, or having access to some material resources we've created through these partnerships. So in doing so, I think we don't just protect these stories, but we also try to create a supporting mechanism, because the voices of those who lived it are so important in preserving that truth. So yeah, we've gone beyond what we are used to, especially in our community, where remembrance is the most important part of keeping the memory. But education, especially educating young people, is as important as remembrance.
Yes, I'll come back to you, Dr. James, to talk about education. For now, Dr. Damas Dukundane, during our conversation, you pretty much talked about your survival story. But one of the things that marked that conversation with me was when you talked about a statement that you haven't forgotten. And that statement is Kadogo Wariye. I'd like you to explain, where does that take you back to? What was the context? What was going on?
Thank you, Mark. Kadogo Wariye, it was actually in Swahili. Kadogo habari, umepata chakula. And those words were a form of greetings from Afande when he was meeting one of us. We were many, and that is late 1994 and early 1995 in a military camp in Eso, Butare. That is a place where, for me, the journey of rebuilding starts from. When genocide was stopped by Ingotanyi, I was 11 years old, and I had lost all members of my family. And I found myself in Eso, that military camp from an orphanage. And that orphanage was run by Terre des Hommes. Terre des Hommes is a Swiss NGO organization that had organized evacuation missions of orphanage. They were called kids without support during the era of post-genocide. And these missions, evacuation missions, they are actually recorded in this book of Le Convoi of Marie Beata Umubyeyi, who was one of the members of those kids evacuated with those missions. And I think it's important to note people who organize those missions, people who stand on the side of humanity. There is a certain Alexis Briquet, who was the lead of the mission. There was Diana Cavadini, and they were in the support of a certain Pierre Antonio Costa, who was one of the consul in. These are things we learned afterwards of our savers. So those words of Kadogo Wariye comes from that time where we were living with our liberators and where we found our first safe shelter, and that's the journey of my rebuilding comes from.
You mentioned something, and I want you to touch on it. You mentioned that they were evacuating you. Where were you, and where were they taking you to?
So I was born in Nyamagabe, the current district, Nyamagabe, and a part called Kaduha. So when genocide started, we were living there, and a certain Miligita, who is you mentioned, who was a nun, German nun, who was running a health center that was close to the Kaduha parish. So when we were all exterminated, some of us were not finished, and we were hiding in the piles of bodies. And this nun was walking around in the bodies, trying to find people who are still breathing. And she actually succeeded to save a number of kids, but also adults. So we knew that a chance of survival was to be able to get to Mirigita. Mirigita was known there for all the actions she was been doing. But during genocide, she helped to find water to the refugees, and then after, when they were exterminated, she came back to find people who were not dead. And later, we were, of course, under Zone Turquoise, and this was an impossible area to be liberated by RPF. And when she was leaving the country, she had organized evacuation mission. She learned about those evacuation missions that were happening in Butare, and that's how we were connected to be evacuated from Kaduha to École Sociale Rwanda, and then later to Burundi.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. James, Aegis Trust emphasizes that education is the best vaccine against hate. And we've heard it many times. In the panel before, we even saw videos of that hate speech being propagated. And also, it was mentioned by the Undersecretary for the Fight Against Genocide that though other crimes are punishable, but hate speech is not. And my question is, as we move farther away from the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, how must our teaching methods change to ensure that young people feel a personal responsibility to carry the flame of remembrance?
Thank you, Mark. Can education be a vaccine against hate? Well, we've learned here in Rwanda and in Europe during the Holocaust that the ideologues, the organizers of genocide are among the most educated, the doctors, the lawyers, priests. And therefore that begs the question, what kind of education can become a vaccine against hate? Literacy and numeracy, STEM, medicine, law are all important. It helps you become informed and perhaps clever, but not necessarily a kind human being. So however education is adapted going forward, the further we move away from 1994, it must adhere to core principles of emphasizing values, that choices that we make have consequences. It must include empathy, including for those people that we might fear. And it must involve critical thinking, because that helps to create some immunity against the conspiracy theories that are out there. But regarding engaging young people as we move away from 1994 and how education should be adapted, first of all, I would say that testimony needs to be, again, central. It can't be replaced. The kind of work that Eric does, going to schools and talking in the UK, and I would urge survivors who are here to write and record as much as you can. But testimonies and video testimonies don't necessarily replace the kind of interaction that Eric has with students. There's a very interesting project has been in the past few years, recording Holocaust survivors in a specific way by asking hundreds of questions, so that in the future, hundreds of years from now, young people can ask Holocaust survivors questions and get answers about their experiences. And I hope we do not leave it too late to begin to do these kind of projects in Rwanda, because it will be important for education as an educational tool going forward. The second, I think, way in which educational methods should be adapted is to draw actually from the experience that you've had, Mark, in running some of the education programs with Aegis Trust, particularly the Youth Champions and Ambassadors program that's now been developed into the Peace Ambassadors Network. What's, I think, effective about that kind of education is that it asks young people, after they learn about the genocide and the pathways to peace and violence, what action are you going to take? It doesn't tell young people what to do, but it facilitates those that then want to do something to strengthen their communities in one way or another and build resilience, for example, by looking out for the vulnerable in communities, or building in their community, or building economic resilience. And the final point I want to comment about in terms of how we need to adapt education in the future is to acknowledge that we live in the TikTok, Instagram generation. In the 19th century, it was observed that lies travel halfway around the world before truth gets its boots on. And those of us who are involved in genocide education and prevention education, peace education, need to become more sophisticated in adapting our education programs onto these kind of platforms without diminishing the genocide in any way, because we need to help truth get its boots on so that it can march against the lies around the world. And if we become even more sophisticated to understand how these algorithms work, how human behavior interacts with these algorithms, we might stand a chance to combat this hate which is becoming, through the misinformation and disinformation, a global crisis. And we need to find ways through these new communication methods to bring our education programs onto them so that humanity might fly halfway around the world before hate gets a chance to rise its head.
And one of the things you said is that survivors need to write, need to have platforms where they can record their testimonies for future generations. And coming back to you, Jeanne, quels sont les défis en matière de...
What are the challenges in terms of memory for the genocide against the Tutsi? So what are them, what for now and for the future?
Thank you. As everybody has been saying, I think you can't kill denial. You can't kill, it's very difficult to kill it dead. In France, a lot was done. For example, we work with those, you know, there was a law in 2019, 2017, against criminalizing denial. And also, we have managed to get the genocide, Rwanda, the genocide against the Tutsi, on the program of A-levels, you know, the last 2 years of secondary school. There are two things. And we have managed also to get a foothold in practically all the schools of our area. We go there, we send survivors, and some of the teachers have accepted us to come and talk to the students. And the Ministry of Education, this is admitted by the Ministry of Education, so that's already acquired. All right, so, but I think this is not enough. We have to be vigilant to keep, because it's very difficult to eliminate denial, so we have to work all the time. Talk with young people, give testimonies by survivors, maintain the documentation, the archives, the artifacts, the books, the articles, everything, so that there is, tomorrow nobody can come and say, oh, these things are stories, they never happened. So document. And I think it was said also this morning, in Africa, we have to do more in Africa, because we've done all this in Africa. In France, we have these memorials, stela, as we said, and other monuments that are visible, because people can see them. But nothing has been in Africa. Nothing has been done. I think there is something in Uganda, and maybe perhaps also in Addis Ababa, but I haven't heard of any other African country that has tried to perpetuate the memory of this genocide. So how are we able to have that? In various countries where you can go for documentation, or you can, maybe you have a permanent exhibition, or at any rate certain source of information for the young people, so that, for example, some of the schools can come with the teachers and look around. Because otherwise this story will be lost. Thank you. Dr. James. We are talking about
countries, or there are places where the genocide against the Tutsi is not termed the way it should be. What are some of the issues that are going to rise because of the wrong terminology?
Given the evidence of hundreds of convictions in international courts and national courts, it's astonishing that we have to make a case for describing what happened here in 1994 as the genocide against the Tutsi. It's important for historical accuracy that it's named for what it is. it's important for accountability. If we don't call it the genocide against the Tutsi, then those who perpetrated the crimes, what is the accountability for? And I don't just mean those that perpetrated crimes here, but also those in the international community who stood by and didn't fulfill their responsibility to protect. One of the other consequences, as we've heard today many times, is that denial will flourish if we don't describe the genocide for what it is. Two of the devices of genocide, those that negate or diminish the genocide, is first of all to describe a double genocide. But again, the hundreds of judgments and rulings of these courts have not described two genocides, they've described one genocide against the Tutsi. The other device is that to describe what happened here as a war, and that civilians were caught up as victims of this war. I think those of us that listened to Theonest talk yesterday at the commemoration, he clearly was not a boy who was caught up as a victim of war. He was hunted day after day because as a 14-year-old, he was being hunted for his identity as a Tutsi. So the nomenclature is important for survivors, because if what is not acknowledged can't be healed. And the last point I want to make about this is that I'm often asked, well, doesn't describing the genocide against the Tutsi diminish lives of other people that perished during this time? And I always respond that those Hutus that were either killed in the war or perished in refugee camps, their lives aren't worth any less. Or even those Hutus that resisted the genocidal regime and died or were killed as a consequence of it, they are honored for their courage. But they weren't victims of genocide. And that brings me to the final point about why it's important, is because naming the genocide against the Tutsi isn't only for commemoration and remembrance. It's about prevention. We heard from the Undersecretary General earlier that genocide is an identity crime. And calling it for what it is, the genocide against the Tutsi, leads us to investigate and expose the roots of the genocide, and furthermore expose what we've heard today from Innocent and through that very powerful film that he showed this morning, that this genocidal ideology against the Tutsi is very much alive and well. So calling it for what it is, genocide against the Tutsi is also a call for action for us to prevent and protect those who are at risk of this ideology today, not just remember those that perished 32 years ago.
And I'm coming to Dr. Damas. Dr. James talked about those who stood by and did nothing. But in your conversation, you mentioned that there is a lady who served you during the genocide against the Tutsi. And my question to you is, what is the role of those rescuers? And what should we learn from them? Because that could also influence what we do now, but also the young people in the future.
Thank you. I think I would say that I don't really have a prescription to make, because things keep happening, and I only see that the responsibility goes to these people who are extraordinary, who are remarkable. And if I had a prescription, I would make it to make more of those people in our society, because most of time the collective, we wait for solution, does not respond timely. In my case, I live by gratitude to those people, to Midigita, who took the risk and a huge bet and was able to save us, to people like Alexis, Briquet, and others, to Inhotanyi that gave me the first shelter. And it's also living by choice. From that history, what you learn, not taking the pain to be consumed by pain, but turn that into a driving force of what you decide to do. In my case, I was lucky to be given opportunities, safe environment, and constant support, and I'm where I am today because many people, many efforts came together from the incredible schoolmates we live together. Right now, when I think about it, names come in my mind, and really, there are these people you find, and most of the time what you have to do is to thank them. And it may be people who hear that standing with the humanity is the only thing that is rewarded. Maybe spirit will raise to be like those ones. It's also a journey of responsibility because we are grateful, we make choices, but it comes a time where it becomes your turn to do something, to give back. And I think that everyone should be compelled to the responsibility of protecting, detaching from what is wrong, learning the truth actively, not being echo of but finding your voice, the true voice. And if there is something that I can, conclude on, people talk about resilience, people talk about hope, but these are qualities that one acquires after a diverse event. And people appreciate people who overcome those challenges to be resilient and to, reflect hope. But these are things we should not have in the first place. We should be living normal, in a communion, in a community, being kind to one another. That's what I think should be the message of me today. Thank you.
You talked about many values, which Dr. James also mentioned, but also all the other panelists. As we come to an end, Eric, preservation is often seen as looking backward, but you've used sports, community building, writing survivor stories, even taking them to school so that they can speak. How does protecting historical records of the genocide against the Tutsi as a tool for survival for the next generations here in Rwanda, but also in the diaspora?
Thank you. Yeah, indeed, preservation for us is not just about the past. It's about survival, it's about identity, it's about resilience. And what we've tried to do to try and capture all these values through different mediums that we use at Isham Foundation, it includes also sport. We believe in the power of sports so much that we see it as a way of also contributing to this way of helping young people, society to understand this very complex history of ours. So In the UK, for example, we've established a program called Play to Remember. Play to Remember use football and dialogue to bring communities together and turning memory into lived values like unity, like empathy. The many young people or other people who have participated in this particular program have come out to say, to show that it has helped them understand much better this particular complex history. So for us, preservation, it's not about looking back, as I said. It's more about equipping the next generation to move forward with truth and purpose. And these particular mediums that we try to use have demonstrated that they can really help achieving this goal.
Indeed, preservation is not only for this generation, but also for equipping the generations to come with values and purpose. And with that, we've come to the end of our panel. If you have a few questions, we can have them during lunchtime, where we can meet these panelists and speak to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again to our panelists for this insightful discussion. We will have the opportunity to speak over lunch, and you can maybe address your questions then. In order to save time, allow me to proceed with the closing of this conference. Your Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizers of this conference, I would like to sincerely thank you and thank all our distinguished speakers and panelists for their valuable contribution to today's discussion. In this period of remembrance, we are reminded that memory must be preserved with accuracy, and that prevention requires constant vigilance, education, and accountability. As highlighted by panelists, the realities lived by persecuted groups in our region is dire. So urgent action is required to prevent further atrocities and to put an end to genocide ideology in the Great Lakes region. So before we break for lunch, and we continue on the second part of our program, which will be a tribute to the 30 years of Iwuka, allow me to invite the panelists and the first row maybe to leave the room first before the rest of the room leaves. We will be having lunch at the pavilion, which is the building on the left-hand side when you go out. Our lunch will be short of approximately 45 minutes, so I will kindly request your presence back in this room by 2:30. Thank you so much. The first row may kindly ask the first row as well. The first row. Yes. Lunch will be at the pavilion, which is on the left side when you go out. Teams from protocol will help you